This video is brought to you by the official book release of Mythal. More on that later in the episode. I've talked a bunch of times on this channel about how I love the art style for Marvel Rivals. So much so that I made a full Illustrator Reacts talking about it, which you might want to go check out if you haven't seen that. But on top of that, I decided that for this month's PopCross Community Redraw, I would get my subscribers to do something with Marvel Rivals that I do a lot. Turn something into dragons. So I'm going to show off the awesome stuff that my subscribers sent in, and I'm going to redraw 4 of the dragons today in my art style, share the lore that admittedly I've tweaked a little bit for all of them, and then also, realistically, I'm probably going to end up doing a sequel to this video as well, because there was a lot of cool stuff sent in. Don't know when the sequel will happen, it probably won't be like a week from now, maybe 2 weeks from now, but you can bet another round of this is going to be coming as well. But for now, round 1. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's go! Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show. I've reached a point where I know I should stop being surprised when an ancient and legendary breed of dragon reveals itself to still be alive in the world I call home. With the Archon Toralei now working as the overseer of my world, magic has continued to reawaken, and creatures with more mystical and unusual abilities have become more commonplace. I was recently blessed with a sighting of a creature that was thought to only be a distant ancestor of a more common species still around today, if it ever existed at all. While I have seen many iron-plated sky dragons in my life, it was only this week that I first got to witness an iron-plated sky pulse. I disregarded these creatures as having existed once, but now have full evidence that they are as real as the legend said. The tale of these creatures goes that they themselves only evolved into their iron-plated form as an offshoot of a once common dragon breed called a Scarlet Stark. They were named after a wealthy adventurer, Tobias Stark, who is seeking to discover a new form of energy, hoping to harvest magic from powerful creatures, though intending to do so without harming them. Despite them seeming fairly unimpressive as far as dragons go, upon studying the Scarlet Stark's blood and fallen scales, Tobias saw incredible potential in these creatures. Their biology struck him as naturally incredibly adaptable to their surroundings. He felt they could absorb traits, both natural and magical, of their surroundings and meld it with their own forms and physiology in a matter of years, instead of over millennia of evolution. He intended to test this theory by simply granting some simple enchanted pieces of armor to bind to their arms or tails, unintrusive elements to see if their bodies would adapt traits of them over a few years. Unfortunately, an old adventuring ally of Stark's turned warmonger felt this would be too slow of a pace to test these creatures' potential. He cared significantly less about their well-being. This man, who to history is simply referred to as the Monger, had recently lost a series of battles to an army called the Revellium. He wanted to never face such defeat again and hoped to give his army a draconic upgrade. Having sent scouts to spy on Tobias, the Monger learned of his research, sent forces to the home of these dragons, and captured as many of them as his forces could wrangle, even taking Stark himself captive when he protested. The Monger trapped all of the dragons he'd taken, and Tobias, inside a series of iron mines that had been abandoned for their toxic fumes. The Monger hoped these dragons would adapt to project an amplified version of these toxic fumes themselves, and become hardened creatures, due to being surrounded by the stone and iron walls. In a sense, this did work, but far better than the Monger had hoped. In a matter of months, a few dozen Scarlet Starks trapped inside changed in size, color, durability, and strength. Their blood itself, influenced by the fumes, shifted from red to a glowing cyan color, along with changing their eyes. The basic flames that they were once able to breathe transformed into condensed beams, far more powerful than they'd been prior. Their once flimsy scales became hardened and metallic, adapting the iron around them. Stark himself tended to the dragons, despite his health rapidly declining from the fumes that were empowering these creatures. Thankfully, as he helped them, they then helped him. While it is uncertain how the dragons knew this would aid him, some allowed him to drink small doses of their altered blood. This itself somehow was able to make Tobias immune to further harm from the fumes. It also meant, when the time came, he was ready to lead the dragons in fighting back. Using some fallen and broken pieces of their now upgraded scales, Tobias built himself a suit of armor, in which he could aid them in the battle to come. Eventually, an old ally of Stark's, an army general in his own right, Jameson Rhodes, learned of Stark's situation and was able to release all the locks and chains holding the door that kept the dragons in their Iron Mine keep. Stark and the dragons then attacked the army of their captors, using their new immense strength and power to wipe the Monger and all his forces from the face of the earth. Since there were only a few dozen of these dragons in the mines, and they did have a proclivity for mating with many other dragons outside their own species, it was believed that over a few centuries, they ceased to exist in this originally altered form, and the closest remnant of them was the iron-plated Sky Dragon. I am very pleased and surprised to see that at least one of this original empowered breed is still alive in the modern day, and I hope it is possible to see a full resurgence of these creatures in the future. Now, Kiefer's Iron Man submission here, I think is so much cooler than my original Iron Man Dragon design that I did back in the first Avengers as Dragons episode. My very first turning superheroes into dragons episode, not counting the original Fantastic Four Dragons episode, which I've since rebooted. But this one is just so cool looking. I was super excited to draw this one. Kiefer clearly has some high level art skills. And as I did in that last Bustar Terminax episode that came out last week, maybe the previous episode put out on here, I think, I do color variants for all of the dragons submitted in this episode based on the fact that Marvel Rivals has alternate skins for all of these characters anyway. So the alternate color schemes that I do in this episode are based on existing alternate color schemes in the game. So for Iron Man here, once I'm done, and I don't record the alternate color scheme changing for all of them because it only takes like a couple minutes to change the color scheme. But for this one, I do very briefly show me doing it at the end, and I use the skin that was, and might probably still is, free to get for Iron Man, the alternate color scheme that's more like black and gold. I forget which one it's called. But I think it's a really cool alternate color scheme, and honestly, in terms of my version of Kiefer's drawing, I don't know which color scheme I like better. I think they both look really cool. Not all of the alternate color schemes work out as well as this one, but I think it was a fun thing to do, especially for this episode. So let's take a look at the finished version of our new Iron Man Dragon. There is another species of dragon that I had never seen in person, but am now told is making a significant resurgence. I knew these creatures did exist, but once thought elements of their physiology were simply being exaggerated by more eccentric beast chroniclers. This species is uncommon in that the males and females of its kind are given different names and have very distinct appearances and abilities from one another. You wouldn't even know they were necessarily related unless you had studied them. The females are called ethereal dagger claws, and the males are referred to as black-crested shade cloaks. These creatures will mate for life and spend the majority of their time together, practically attached at the hip. With that said, the shade cloaks are the one with a drive to hunt for food for itself, its partner, and its young. They have the unique ability to wrap their wings around prey and drain the life out of them. When the process is complete, all that remains is a corpse to be fed upon. Contrarily, the dagger claws actually have the ability to heal common injuries, or at least speed up the healing process, using a glowing white energy that projects from their fangs and claws. Though, fair warning, while the dagger claw is not as prone to combat as the shade cloaks, they are still capable of it, especially if you, or a perceived foe, threaten their partner or their young. Some say that being engulfed in the shade cloak's wings when it is not threatening you can have an effect on the mind similar to strong forms of psychedelics. Some suggest that it can even awaken dormant mystical abilities in someone. Though, if I do see these creatures myself sometime in the near future, I think I'll do so at a distance. I encounter enough mind-bending events and creatures in my life as it is. Now, Funkin' Forever's submission of Cloak and Dagger was awesome, but to be honest, this was a tough character competition-wise, because I got a lot of submissions for Cloak and Dagger, and lots of them were really cool. It was a tough choice. It became clear that I had to pick a Cloak and Dagger one, because I didn't necessarily realize they were one of the most played characters in the game, but apparently they are. I don't think I've actually tried them out in the game, But I guess that might also partially make sense because, you know, they get picked by people a lot, so someone on my team probably usually has one. Anyway, I hope it's not super noticeable. I'm going to try and cut out all the evidence of it, but my drawing tablet was glitching out a bunch while I did this drawing, so I was kind of sporadically starting, stopping, trying to fix the tablet. I think I got it figured out now, but I was kind of worried as that was happening that was going to mess up this drawing. And I will say this drawing looks fairly distinct, but I'm very happy with it. I would say it looks a bit cartoonier than most of my dragon drawings, but to me that almost makes it look like a Wings of Fire cover. I've done a Wings of Fire episode before, and I talked about the covers for it a bunch in an Illustrator Reacts episode. I think it was the one with Bone on the thumbnail. And I'm not saying that this drawing ends up being as good as Joy Ang's Wings of Fire covers, which I think are absolutely beautiful and incredible, but I just think the style of the dragon's heads and shapes and stuff like that makes it feel to me like it has major Wings of Fire vibes to it. Anyway, of the Cloak and Dagger submissions, I think Funkin' Forevers was my favorite, and I'm glad I chose this pairing. And this is the one in the episode where I think the alternate color scheme doesn't work as well. I do another version that is I think they called it like lemon and lime color skin for Cloak and Dagger. One thing you will notice for the alternate color schemes that I think subscriber who got chosen for the last community redraw, Super Blonde Nerd, pointed out in the Bust Our Terminax episode I did recently where I was doing the alternate color schemes, is that I also change the color of the backgrounds, whether it's a graphic design background or in this case a actual drawn background, so that there is the still contrast between the characters with their changed color and the background behind them, so that they stand out nicely against it. So one thing you'll notice in this one is in the original drawing, the background is like a blue to greenish tint kind of background, and then in the version where I change them to being yellow and green themselves, I make the background more of a blue to purple kind of color. Again, just to help them stand out a little bit more. I do think both are cool enough, but again, I think the original's the coolest, and I guess you can all decide for yourself. Let's take a look at both. Have you ever wanted to see Ares, the Greek god of war, eating a sandwich? Well, that is just one of many bonus drawings that you can find in the book release of Mythal, which is officially out today. This is the first project I've made in years and years that has exclusive artwork that I made just for this book. You can't find it anywhere else, including an epic double splash page on pages 56 and 57 that I'm super happy with the result of. The book also has all of the art that officially came out with the series Mythal as it was coming out on the channel last year. It's a mythology-based action-adventure story that works in monsters and gods from many different mythologies, and also serves as kind of a prequel to a lot of stuff in Multiverse Tales, involving Tarsa's origins and the Archon's origins and stuff like that. Also, there's a little bonus gallery of extra PopCross Studios art at the back of the book, stuff that I'm super happy with, and thought would just be nice to throw in at the end. Also, let's see how much people want Mythal 2. Because see, I have an idea for a sequel to Mythal that could just be like 3 episodes or something, or I could flesh it out into an entire another series and book. So, if the paperback and ebook version of Mythal sell 1,111 copies in its first month, so by May 1st, then I will officially greenlight a full sequel to Mythal. And I've already got lots of ideas for that story, so let's see how this goes. But anyway, it's up on Amazon now. I hope you all like it and the bonus artwork in it. A lot of work went into this, and I hope you enjoy. But now, back to more Marvel Rivals Dragons. Thinking about creatures that work in tandem, as the Dagger, Claw, and Shade Cloak do, actually reminded me of a creature I learned of in another dimension I visited in the past, and likely will visit again. The Archon demon Cypheramov, prior to her passing, had once invaded dimension D107. Her mechanical demon infections had altered many of the miraculous creatures from this realm into brutal killing machines to do the demon's bidding. She was forced out of this realm and eventually lost her physical form, but since her defeat was not dealt by my ally Alexis Jones, also known as the Reaper, Cypheramov's demons were not all wiped out along with her, meaning many still remain in D107 and in other realms she is attacked. Many of the demons are simply still acting on the instruction they'd been given originally, to attack, kill, and spread their infection if possible. One rare case has ceased its assault, however, in D107, due to it symbiotically bonding with a creature that was not infected itself. The infected creature was called a venomous Dracoremedus, and the uninfected a symbiotic Dracorantura. Both of these actually bear a striking resemblance to a species found in my world called the Dracorachnia. The venomous Dracoremedus, infected with Cypheramov's virus, had become partially mechanical and very hostile to all other creatures and beings. In spite of this, a particularly bold, uninfected, symbiotic Dracorantura, often known to bond with members of the Dracoremedus species, saw an opportunity to merge with an enhanced version of its own common partners. It stuck itself to the back of the infected Dracoremedus, and the two bonded. But it seems the Rantura was not then infected by Cypheramov's virus as well. That is what I would have expected to happen. Instead, the unified version of this creature is aggressive and hostile, but does not seem to be driven to mindless slaughter the way Cypheramov's other infected creatures are. It is as though this unified creature's consciousness is like a blend of the infected creature and the uninfected symbiotic Dracorantura, making it more aggressive than is common, but not to a demonic extent. While it has been reported that these creatures can separate from each other when the situation requires it, they spend the majority of their time fused together as one unified beast. Together, they are able to spit webbing, as well as toxic plasmic blasts. They can superheat their claws to carve through even the toughest shields. Their armor is also extra durable, enhanced by Cypheramov's metallic virus. Now, this tale was told to me secondhand by another from my home realm, Vasilia Kuznet. Allies of hers, calling themselves the Secret Knights, were the ones to encounter this creature, and struggled to scare it off from approaching an ill-protected village. Because of this, some details may be altered, as Vasilia does occasionally embellish the tales she's been told, but regardless, this does sound like a fascinating variant on a creature I'm very familiar with from my own realm. Now, Glitchy Ronin always submits awesome stuff, and I have redrawn some of Glitchy Ronin's stuff before, but this one was just next level. The multiple designs, the mixing it with Cypheramov's demons that invaded my Dungeons & Dragons universe, having a Peni Parker dragon be a variant of the Spider-Man dragon from Tayron's universe, leaning into the multiverse stuff both in my multiverse and in Spider-Verse. There are just so many brilliant layers to this. So Glitchy Ronin, fantastic job. I did make some tweaks to the lore because Glitchy Ronin suggested that Cypheramov's demons, now that Cypheramov is dead but wasn't killed by Alexis Jones, her demons would then kinda go dormant, I think is what Glitchy Ronin originally said. And I tweaked that because that's not how I see it. Canonically, I wouldn't have necessarily expected people to know this, but if an Archon is killed and not by the Reaper, their demons do continue to stay alive and just keep acting on the last orders they were given. So that was one of the reasons I had to tweak the lore a little bit. Cypheramov's demons also now, if they're given new orders by Tarsa, because Tarsa has taken over Cypheramov's abilities, they'll then do whatever Tarsa says. But outside of that, they're just acting on the last thing Cypheramov instructed them to do. Now with this one, I also decided to do a alternate color scheme, even though I was hesitant on this one because the Venom skin that Glitchy Ronin was working off of, which is my personal favorite skin for Peni Parker in Marvel Rivals so far, it isn't just an alternate color. It has different shapes, like it's got the mandible type things coming off its head. So I was like, it doesn't make as much sense to do the regular red color variant, like Peni Parker's normal skin that you have for her in the game, as just a color variation on this one that I'm drawing here. But then I was like, oh, what the heck, it's not going to take me that long to do, let's do it anyway. Add a little bit more blue than Peni Parker has in the game, so it's more like a classic Spider-Man sort of look as well. And I'm super glad I ended up doing that, because, to be honest, no, I do think the purple version still works better, but I think this might be my favorite original and alternate color scheme combination for this episode. But of course it helps that Glitchy Ronin's submission was epic, fantastic job. Now let's take a look at the finished artwork. Focusing once more on my own realm, another fascinating creature I've observed is the Magnesian Drake, or more specifically, a rather dangerous variant of them. Some claim that these creatures were the original ancestors of a breed called the Sokovian Scarlet Drake, which may have come about as a result of them both having a similar M-shaped crest or form on their heads, but I think this connection is unfounded. The Magnesian drakes are not particularly miraculous in their own right, but there is a mutated offshoot of them that is incredibly rare and powerful. These creatures in their original form are named for the magnesium spikes and plating that naturally form and grow across their bodies. And as the name of the original version of the species suggests, they are drakes and are unable to fly. But the mutated variant of them have an odd change to their name in that they are referred to as the magnetic winged drake. It is a bit of an odd name, but understandable given that they are definitively proven to have been a mutated offshoot of the Magnesian drakes, albeit ones that have grown wings. And on top of that, they have the inherent magical gift to attract and, to some degree, control metallic minerals in their environment. They can attract these minerals onto their wings, bodies, heads, and tails to further armor plate and protect them. They have even been known to form blades on the ends of their tails with which to fight. Using this ability, they can easily strip hunters of their weapons, so long as the weapons are forged with some type of metal. I have seen but one of these in person myself, and it was from a great distance. I also promptly needed to flee, as these creatures, while they are incredibly gentle towards drakes and other dragons, violently despise humans. To be fair, humans have relentlessly hunted their kind for the rare form of magnesium that grows on their bodies, but unlike creatures such as the monsters of song, who we've made some headway in repairing relations with, there seems to be no convincing these winged drakes that humans could ever be a safe ally to them. They have even been known to specifically seek out and hunt parties of dragon hunters and ruthlessly slaughter them, even if these hunters were not seeking their own kind. These dragons also seem to have natural leadership qualities, as they have been known to goad and convince other dragons into fighting humans under their command. I hope to one day be able to encourage one of these creatures to consider me an ally, but I hold no grudge against them for not feeling kindly towards humans, considering what we've done to them in the past. Now, Hayden is another person who's submitted tons and tons of awesome art before, and I was super excited to see a really good version of Magneto coming in from Hayden. And I was super excited to do this one, though I do think I failed this one a little bit on the pose. I still like how it turned out overall. It's pretty cool looking, and I love Magneto's design in Marvel Rivals. Hayden's version, giving him a little bit more of a carved up and damaged sort of look, I thought was cool. I might have cleaned it up a little bit more than Hayden did, but I knew what would be fun for this one is doing the alternate color schemes, because obviously the version in Marvel Rivals is more of a silvery and black kind of look, but Magneto's more traditional look is more red and purple, and they do have an alternate color scheme of him in the game that looks like that as well. I could also tell in Hayden's drawing that Hayden had kind of erased out the floating metal ring behind Magneto, and my guess for that is that Hayden realized when Magneto makes the sword for himself to fight with, he uses the ring behind him to form that, so he wouldn't necessarily have both at once. That's just me guessing what Hayden was thinking here, but I decided to have a bit of both in there anyway, the bladed tail and the ring behind him, because I was just like, they're both cool elements, I want to have them in there. Again, I think I could have come up with something a little bit more interesting for the pose on this one, but overall I think it's pretty cool. And I hope you all enjoy it and the color variant of it, so let's take a look. If you enjoyed this and you want more Marvel Rivals stuff out of me, you might want to check out an episode of the Trismegistus Academy where I worked in Marvel Rivals characters. I also did a Fantastic Four Dragons episode recently, or like I said before, I've done an Illustrator Reacts episode specifically revolving around Marvel Rivals stuff. I'd also like to say a huge thank you as always to everybody who participated in this episode. It was a super fun redraw to do, and specific thank you to the people who were chosen for today. Again, there will probably be another episode, but I'm not calling for new submissions for that one. I'm gonna use stuff that was already sent in and probably shown today. Funkin' Forever, Glitchy Ronin, Hayden Bias, and Kiefer. For the next month's community redraw, it's going to be Bustar Terminax and Aliens related. Really, to get the proper rundown of what you should submit for it, you'll just have to go to the Google Docs linked in the description and give a read of that. But I mentioned in my most recent Bustar Terminax episode, turning Disney creatures into aliens, that a subscriber had suggested a really cool idea for a Bustar Terminax series that I I really like the idea of doing a full series out of it, but thinking about how many series I have in my head to do after the ones I have running right now, and considering that Mythal Lethal 2, again, if it sells 1,111 copies in its first month, could be getting a full series sequel, this story probably doesn't have enough priority for me, but I do like the idea of doing like a 2 or 3 episode arc about it. So the next community redraw is actually going to be the next 2 months community redraws. So it's going to come out 2 months from now, and there's multiple options for what to submit, so give a read of the Google Docs in the description. I'm super excited to tell that story and see what you all submit for it, but besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote I read this week that is just a really good idea for how to reframe a situation that you're not happy about being put in. And that is to shift the idea of why is this happening to me to what is this teaching me? Every difficult situation we go through has something we can learn from it so that if we face a situation similar in the future, we can go through it better and get through it faster, or even not be bothered by the fact that it's happening at all. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. Goodbye.